Hey there everyone, welcome back to Utility Sports 2025 NBA Draft Grades. It has been roughly 12 hours since the conclusion of the 2025 NBA Draft, and I feel like it's time to give my overall grades for all 30 teams. Now this is over on my Substack. Link is at the very top of the description if you're looking for good ways to support the channel. This is one of the best ways to do so. Go over there, become a free subscriber or a paid subscriber if you want to. It's totally up to you, but that is a great place to support me and help grow my writing as well. So just a little bit of information here before we start. Draft grades are going to be different for everybody. You know, some teams had different assets, they had different goals, different things to accomplish coming into the draft this year. So an A grade for a team that only had one second round pick is of course far different than a team who had an A grade with multiple first round picks. Hopefully that makes sense. If you have any questions, comment them down below. But let's start with the Atlanta Hawks here, who their draft haul this week was extremely strong. They landed Kristaps Porzingis in a trade with the Boston Celtics and Brooklyn Nets, a 3-team deal there. Asa Newell was their draft pick at number 23 out of Georgia. And then additionally, what they were able to land was a 2026 most favorable pick between the Pelicans, Bucks in next year's draft after trading down from 13 to 23 where they selected Asa Newell. I thought the Hawks did a great job. I gave them an A+ grade. I'll leave this up if you want to pause and read it. Otherwise, if you want to follow along by grabbing the Substack yourself and following along with me, I thought Atlanta did great here. I gave them an A+. I thought Porzingis gives the Hawks and Trae Young something they haven't had during Trae Young's career, which is a legitimate stretch big man, someone who can be a tremendous trail, delay action big, some playmaking feel, and of course the ability to stretch out behind the three-point line while also protecting the rim. Porzingis is one of the rare players in the league who can shoot at the rate and at the percentage that he does, especially with the deep range that he possesses, while also still being able to anchor a defense, block a ton of shots, and I think that's going to stand out with how good Atlanta's team defense is becoming and how fast and young they are. And then I think around that, not only getting Asa Newell, another guy who can fit long-term into this team's front court picture, but then that 2026 Bucks Pelicans pick is one of the most sought-after assets now that the Hawks have, and that pick could potentially deliver one of Cam Boozer, AJ DeBonsa, or Darren Peterson, and any of those three would change the Atlanta Hawks in such a positive manner. I like Derek Queen a lot. We'll talk about him when we get to the Pelicans, but I thought Atlanta did tremendous. The Boston Celtics, for me, with their draft haul, they walk away with Hugo Gonzalez, Amari Williams, Max Shulga. They also get multiple future second-round picks, but it did come at the cost of trading pick 32, Kristaps Porzingis, and Jrue Holiday. They also brought in George Niang and Anthony Simons. So a pretty active early offseason period so far for the Boston Celtics. And I'm giving them a B+. While I do think that they were at a pretty significant talent deficit from this situation, I think the reality is for a team that was slated to be in the second apron once again, that had significant desires to get out of the second apron, restore some of their flexibility, and protect their long-term future draft control from being frozen, this is one of the best outcomes for the Celtics this offseason. Now, it does come at the cost of their short-term team, but with Tatum out from an Achilles injury, I think a B+ grade is definitely warranted. I still, again, losing talent sucks in the NBA. You never want to just see talent go out the door, but I thought they did a good job staying pick positive in that process. Instead of having to use assets to get off of contracts, they were actually able to net assets for those contracts, specifically Jrue Holiday to Portland. It really opened up the door for them to get out of that second apron. If that deal doesn't materialize the way that it does, I'm just not sure if the Celtics would be able to get off of that money long term. Being able to trade him for an expiring Anthony Simons, I thought was tremendous. For Brooklyn, they of course came in with 5 first-round picks in the NBA draft and selected them all. They selected Yegor Demon, Nolan Traore, Drake Powell, Ben Sharaf, and Danny Wolf in the first round in that order. They also acquired 2 future second-round picks after trading pick 36 away, and they acquired Terrence Mann's contract in the deal that brought in pick 22 ultimately, which became Drake Powell. For me, I'm giving the Nets a C+. I really do like what they were able to do in the 20s. Drake Powell, Ben Sharaf, Danny Wolf, those are all A grades for me with those picks. I just don't love the opportunity cost here at pick number 8, selecting Yegor Demin, who I had 25th on my final big board, and drafting Nolan Traore at 19, who finished number 29 on my big board. I think the Nets would have been better served using those top 2 picks elsewhere. I also would have loved the idea of them moving those 2 together to get up for someone a little bit higher in the draft. If they would have walked away with the Jeremiah Fears at pick 7, instead, if they traded 8 and 19 to move up 1 spot, it might have been worth it for them, because I think there is a substantive difference between Jeremiah Fears and Yegor Demin as prospects. I just don't love the overall process here for Brooklyn. Now, I do think that their team is still kind of on the upswing long term. They have a lot of playmaking. They do have a lot of talent in this draft still. And I think especially that Saraf pick at 26 really saves them. I think there's a good chance he becomes the best guard they drafted this year. And you also look at Danny Wolf, a dribble pass shoot big man with some significant skills on the perimeter, real functionality as a DHO big man, and also a short roll passer. I think that gives a lot of functionality here, so it's not an all-for-nothing draft. I think the Nets did get some functional pieces, and depending on how the 2026 season goes, maybe they're at the very top of the draft, landing one of Dybonsa, Peterson, or Boozer, then all of a sudden we feel a lot better about what the Nets have long-term. The Hornets. For me, I thought they had a very good draft. Walk out with Con Knipple at number 4. I think a very safe, stabilizing pick. They get Liam McNeely at 29 after trading Mark Williams. They get Sion James, Ryan Kalkbrenner, 2 really good second-round picks. They were a huge winner for me in round 2 of the draft. And then they also get that 2029 first-round pick, which is the least favorable of a 3-team swap via Phoenix in that Mark Williams trade. For me, I give them an A- overall. It would probably be an A or better if they did not trade Mark Williams away. Did not have Liam McNeely on their draft sheet this year. If they just walked out with Knipple, Sion James, Kalkbrenner, and still had Mark Williams, I'd feel quite good actually about the Hornets going into this next season. I do think losing a center, even though he's been injury prone, and obviously a fresh start might be good for both sides here. I do think losing that talent who you drafted in the top 20 a few years ago is pretty unfortunate, but they got a lot of functionality here. I think Knipple opens up a ton of offensive avenues for Charles Lee to explore. Liam McNeely can be a solid off-the-catch guy for them, maybe attack some closeouts and spot up in the corner. That's where I think he's going to be most threatening as an NBA player. And then you look at Sion James, Ryan Kalkbrenner, I think they can both have two-way impacts as role players in the league. I think Sion James is this year's Terrence Mann, where he's going to be able to catch on, stick around for a while. I think a lot of players and or a lot of GMs and media and fans are going to gravitate toward him a bit just with his work ethic, the hustle and intensity that he plays with. And then Kalkbrenner is a rim volume machine. I think that helps Charlotte a lot. I really liked what they were able to do. And I think they walked away pretty well after this year's draft. The Chicago Bulls walked out with Noah Esenge, Lachlan Olbrich, and cash considerations. I'm going to give this an A- grade. I think that they did decently well. Now, they only had a few assets to work with in this draft. Decided to not move up from pick number 12, decided to not move down. And I think Esenge fits them pretty well. I think their pace, playmaking, all of that stuff's going to allow him to thrive as a cutter, play finisher, transition scorer. I think his defensive event creation will help get them out and running more, and I think it's going to tighten together their team defense a little bit as well. So an A- here for Chicago I think is more than fair. Hopefully Olbrich can develop as a hub big man for them, someone who can handle and pass a little bit at that position. We'll see how that all materializes, but Esenge is really the headliner for the Chicago Bulls. There is a little bit of risk involved with this pick. He doesn't have those traditional dribble, pass, shoot skills that make someone a safe pick. But I think in the context of Chicago, around Josh Giddey, around Kobe White, this is definitely something that is functional and valuable for them going into this next season. The Cleveland Cavaliers came in with very few assets, but walked out with some okay players. Specifically Tyrese Proctor at pick 49. He's the one I really want to highlight and focus on in this video. He was number 34 on my final big board. And as a bigger guard who can shoot the basketball, I think there's some significant catch and shoot value that he will be able to provide around the context of Donovan Mitchell and Darius Garland long term. Now they do have Ty Jerome up for unrestricted or for free agency this offseason. We'll see what that ultimately looks like, what his number comes in at. I think somewhere a little south of the full mid-level exception is what I'm expecting for him. But I do think in general Tyrese Proctor is a little bit of insurance in the event that you lose him. And worst case, long-term can maybe function in as your fourth guard, a depth piece for you, and maybe crack into the top 8 of that rotation at some point in time. The Dallas Mavericks, I gave an A+2. I didn't want to highlight too many two-way players. I do think Ryan Nembhard is super important to talk about, though, especially given Kyrie Irving's injury. The Mavericks needed another ball handler, and they got a good one here. Ryan Nembhard led all of college basketball in assists per game with 9.7 assists. Was just absolutely tremendous throughout his entire college career, and especially most recently for Gonzaga. I thought Nembhard was a super easy bet to be a good player in the NBA. Finished number 36 on my big board this year. And of course, you got Cooper Flagg. This is the foundational franchise piece. This is the cornerstone icon now of the Dallas Mavericks. Anything other than an A+ is just not realistic. The Mavericks did tremendous. If you're not giving him an A+, you're doing it wrong. They didn't do anything crazy big. They just kind of followed the plan. Got the first pick, drafted Cooper Flagg, and Nico Harrison didn't mess anything up. The Denver Nuggets. Draft haul was nothing. It's an incomplete grade, just like their front office. Just no activity. I would have loved to see them try and find a way into the second round this year. Kobe Brea, reuniting him with Daron Holmes II, I thought would have been really good. Ultimately, they weren't able to get anything done. It's not the end of the world. I do think Denver, again, if you're being cautious and looking at their lack of assets to begin with, you don't want to be too aggressive and misplace your assets in a deal this year. But it's hard to walk away from the draft and be excited about the Denver Nuggets, just completely honest. The Detroit Pistons, they drafted Chaz Lanier at pick 37. This is an A grade. Now, remember what I said. Not all A grades are the same. Detroit didn't come into the draft with a lot of flexibility because they owed their first-round pick to Minnesota from a trade many moons ago with protections on it. But that's a huge positive here. I think that's one big way to look at it. If you're Detroit, you should be so happy because you now have control over your own future trade flexibility. You've got draft picks at your disposal to work with, either via trade or in future drafts as selections. And I think, they did well with Chaz Lanier here. A little bit of insurance in case you lose one of or both of Malik Beasley and Tim Hardaway Jr. this offseason. And I think Lanier, who's a really good movement shooter, a tremendous three-point shooter with really respectable positional length and size for his position. If you're on the Lanier bandwagon a little bit more than Kobe Brea, you can talk yourself into it because Lanier is a little bit bigger, a little bit longer, and a bit stronger. So defensively a little bit more viable at the next level than Kobe Brea in my opinion, which is why, even though Brea was still on the board for them and I would have preferred the Brea selection, I'm not mad at all about the Lanier pick. I think he fits really well around Cade and Duren. I think this is super functional for the Detroit Pistons in this year's draft. Moving on to the Golden State Warriors. The draft haul here, they came in with pick 41, ultimately traded it backward for 2 second-round picks in this year's draft in a trade with the Phoenix Suns. And at 52, they landed Alex Tui from the Sydney Kings in the NBL. And then at 56, they drafted Will Richard from the Florida Gators. I give them a B+. This is another low opportunity grade here for them. I'm not going to too aggressively say that this was an absolute home run for them in the second round, but these are two guys that can play for them. Alex Tui, someone who comes with real intensity and grit, gets on the floor and has some shooting touch, and I think all of those things play very, very smoothly for Steve Kerr. We've seen a guy like Guy Santos be able to stick around, carve out an NBA role with them, and I think Tui could be in that kind of same boat. Will Richard, another super smart, high IQ player, had a real impact this past year for the Florida Gators. I thought, again, with the low amount of assets, the low quality of picks the Warriors had, these two guys stand out in a big way as impactful players who can serve in their front court, play out on the wings a bit, stretch the floor for them around Curry, around Jimmy, and around Draymond. And I think the Warriors, even though, again, they're small assets, I do think they added 2 players who will stick on their roster for a while. The Houston Rockets here. Their draft haul was Kevin Durant. I give them an A-. I don't think it's as much of a home run as everyone else seems to think. And part of that is they allowed Phoenix some maneuverability. And pick 10 ended up becoming Kaman Maluach, who was the top center in the draft, according to many people's big boards. I myself had him as the second best big, but very close to the number 1 big, and 4th overall. So I was huge on Kaman Maluach. I thought he was awesome for Phoenix. And if you're the Rockets and you owe future Suns assets, looking at what Phoenix was able to accomplish this offseason so far, getting a lot younger, the Suns have went from one of the oldest rosters in the league to one of the youngest. And that transformation overnight has them way more athletic. They're going to get up and down the court a lot quicker, and they've got some significant screen setting now around Devin Booker as well. So the Rockets, I do think they individually got better this offseason. They traded one of their worst high minute per game players in Jalen Green to one of their better ones now in Kevin Durant. He does come with long-term concerns, his contract, his age, but I think the Rockets still did well for themselves and get an A- here by bringing Kevin Durant into the fold. The Indiana Pacers, I have a draft haul here of Cam Jones, Taylor Peter, and a future first-round pick, in fact, their own in this upcoming draft after trading away pick 23. The grade for me is an A. I really like the Cam Jones pick. The Taylor Peter pick, you can definitely sell yourself on because of his shooting efficiencies. This is a very analytics-based draft for the Pacers. Taylor Peter was extremely effective, 58% from the floor this past year for Liberty, over 45% on threes. This is a Ben Shepherd kind of selection for them, where they selected Shepherd out of Belmont in the first round a few years ago. They now get Peter here out of Liberty late in the second round, and it is a real chance that he could be a sneaky smart grab for them. I do like Cam Jones quite a bit. I think he'll actually step into some real opportunity and chance here to play because of the Halliburton injury. And then getting their own first-round pick back this next year gives them a lot of flexibility, especially with respect to the Stepien rule. It's hard not to love what the Pacers were able to accomplish. The Los Angeles Clippers, their draft haul included Yannick Niederhauser out of Penn State, and at pick number 50, Kobe Sanders from Nevada. I gave them a D+. I just don't love this haul for the Clippers. They have routinely burned late first, early second round picks over the last 4 or 5 years. You look at the guys like Daniel Oturu, Fiondu Kabengele, Kobe Brown. It just isn't a great collection of players that they've drafted between picks 25 and 35. And I think Yannick Niederhauser, a guy who I had in the late 40s on my big board, is not worth taking, especially over someone like a Ryan Kalkbrenner, who is just a much better rim volume, at the rim, dunking machine big man. So, it's hard for me to walk away and feel really good about what the Clippers were able to accomplish. I don't think Kobe Sanders is going to play a whole lot for the Clippers this upcoming year. I thought if they would have gone with a veteran point guard, someone who like a Ryan Nembhard or like a Mark Sears, he would have actually had a role and could have played on this team. They didn't accomplish that. They drafted an older guard who, yes, he's big and long, a little bit like Delano Banton, but he's a little older too, and I think less ready than some of those other guards I mentioned. So I'm just not a huge fan here. Do I think James Harden can make Yannick Niederhauser semi-productive in his minutes offensively? I do think so, but it's one of the rare examples of a guy who has a career negative BPM getting drafted, especially in the first round. The Los Angeles Lakers came into the draft with just one pick in the 50s, but were able to move up. They traded up with cash all the way from 55 up to 36 in a series of deals and drafted Adu Thero out of Arkansas. This is a huge win for me, an A+++ for the Lakers. They made a huge splash. They got a guy who I had ranked 11 on my big board. Now I know some people are going to say, well, he can't shoot. Yes, you're completely right. That is his biggest concern right now. Not a good free throw shooter. Not a good three-point shooter by any stretch of the imagination, but he does everything else so well. He's an extremely instinctive cutter. He had a ton of success playing off of Boogie Fland in that Arkansas offense this past year. Shot over 60% on two-pointers and had an unbelievable free throw rate at 69.2%. You also look at his defensive metrics, his impressive steal rate for a forward, his incredible block rate for a forward. This is a super high-impact defensive player, and I just don't understand how he didn't go earlier. I kind of expected coming into the draft that he would ultimately be either a super late first or early second round pick, but it's still incredible to actually see that play out because he was so productive on a per-minute basis early in his college career at Kentucky when it comes to defensive impact, and then this year he was incredibly productive in a bigger role for Calipari at Arkansas. So this is a guy who I think is just going to be awesome. Finished the year with a 10.6 BPM. Impact tends to do well in the NBA, especially when it's a player with projectable roles, projectable tools to fill a certain role. And Adu Thero, I think, checks all of those boxes as the Lakers' newest best athlete on their team. The Memphis Grizzlies here, their draft haul includes Cedric Coward, Javon Small, Jemai Mashak, and a 2026 first-round pick. Likely will be the Suns' asset. A 2030 first-round pick via Orlando. Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, and Cole Anthony. So I did rope the Desmond Bane trade here into this for Memphis. And I give them an A- overall. I think they did so well in the Desmond Bane trade. It set them up to find a replacement for him in this draft where they moved up to number 11. Now, I wasn't as high on Coward as others, but I still had him in the top 20 on my board. So he's a Very talented player. I do think there's a good chance he returns significant value in the opportunity he will have for the Grizzlies replacing Desmond Bane. I thought Javon Small at 48 was a high value grab. Meshack's defensive value that he showcased consistently at Tennessee as Mr. Irrelevant in this year's draft gives him a significant chance to actually play NBA basketball for the Grizzlies down the road. I thought Memphis had a good draft for themselves. I thought the Desmond Bane trade set them up for success, saved them some financial flexibility down the road too. I thought Memphis has had a pretty good offseason so far. The Miami Heat, Kasparis Jakubonis was their only pick. And the fact that he fell to them at number 20 was an absolute home run. I give them an A+ here. I really love this for Miami. I think Jakubonis is a perfect fit as a DHO receiver, a guy who can play off the catch and handle the basketball, run pick and rolls, super high three-point attempt rate, and I think long-term has some tools to build off from a dribble pass shoot perspective. Reads defense as well. I think he's very timely in his decision making. And I think he processes the game better than most in this year's draft. So I tend to like to bet on intelligence and IQ. Eric Spoelstra is someone who weaponizes those things better than anyone as an NBA head coach. And I think the Heat did really well for themselves with this selection. The Milwaukee Bucks. Their draft haul included Bogoslav Markovic, and they signed a two-way contract for Mark Sears. Grade is an A-. Now, the Markovic pick is specifically what I'm grading here. First of all, Mark Sears, I absolutely love this for them. He has a significant opportunity ahead of himself with Damian Lillard's Achilles injury. I think the Bucks are set up to give Mark Sears significant opportunity to actually play a lot, and succeed. So that's a huge W for me. I had Mark Sears top 30 on my final board at number 30. Markovic for me finished at number 41 on my final board. I think he's very talented. I think the issue here for Milwaukee is they come with a whole host of flaws and trying to find ways to improve it. I think they needed to get more athletic. That's the one thing they really didn't do this year. Markovic, not a great athlete. Very skilled, technically sound, not a great athlete. Mark Sears, as much as I love him as a prospect, he's a small guard and not the most athletic guy in the world. I still think some of the Bucks' biggest flaws, athleticism around Giannis especially, are not answered. Their team defense did not improve. And Markovic and Sears, as much as I like their offensive talent and do believe that they're going to be able to carve out niches in the NBA, I don't think the Bucks advance themselves as playoff contenders this year in the postseason. So, I like the players they got. I'm going to give them an A- for that. But you really can't expect this team to be a whole lot better next year, especially with Dame suffering an Achilles tear. He's going to be out the entire year. And, the rest of the roster has got a year older. Brook Lopez is a year older. If they're able to retain him even. I don't love Kyle Kuzma. I just think this team comes with its own host of flaws. The Minnesota Timberwolves, their draft haul included two centers, Joan Beringer, Rocco Zikarsky from Brisbane of the NBL, and then multiple future second-round picks when they traded out of pick 31. The grade for me is a B. Now, I would have loved for them to stick at 36 and draft Adu Thiero. I thought that would have been a tremendous asset for them. It's a little weird that they drafted two centers, but Zikarsky, super tall, long, 7'4", and then Beringer, someone who is still relatively new to the game of basketball, ranked second in the Adriatic League this past year in blocks per game, ranked actually number 1 in block percentage. This is a very good player with some elite physical tools, and you could definitely sell me on him being the center of the future down the road for the Timberwolves. Again, not the near future, I'm talking 4 or 5 years from now, but definitely could sell me on him being a long-term impact player for the Wolves as a shot blocker, rim protector. Zikarsky just hasn't been productive and hasn't been a good player up to this point of his career. I don't love that pick for them at 45, but he's long and tall. We'll see if that stands out for them. Definitely will at worst be impactful in Summer League this year in Vegas. The New Orleans Pelicans, this is one of the hot button teams. Boy, were they active. Joe Dumars has been making calls. Draft haul here. Jeremiah Fears at 7. Pick number 13. They drafted Derek Queen, the number 3 player on my big board. They sent out pick 23 and a 2026 first-round pick to do so. Pretty big risk there. They also drafted Micah Peavy from Georgetown, who has one good year of track record success as a three-point shooter in his long college career. They also acquired Jordan Poole and Sadiq Bey in a deal as well. The grade for me is an A+, with the risk of becoming a D-. You might say, what do you mean by this? From a close-up viewpoint, I think this one's a really important one for me to read, so I'm going to read this one to you. From a close-up viewpoint, if you're really close to the picture and you see what the Pelicans got on draft night, it's really easy to love what they got. This draft class is an absolute banger for them. The Pels walk out with Derek Queen, who ranked 3rd on my final big board, and Jeremiah Fears, who ranked 8th. 2 top 8 players in this year's draft on my final big board. These two are massive offensive talents who have legitimate chances to both become foundational core pieces of the New Orleans Pelicans' future. Queen's skill set makes him one of the most playstyle versatile big men in recent NBA draft history, while Fears is a long-term project pick as the reclassified true freshman, lit up college basketball in big moments, but had poor rim and three-point efficiency. So there are some concerns for me coming into his NBA career, and I think it's going to be a bit of a process and a bit of a ascension we're going to need to see from him. He's not NBA ready yet at this point fully. The wider view, though, is terrifying. So I like the close-up view a lot. They got 2 really good players in this draft, in my opinion. But sending out an unprotected swap best first-round pick in 2026 to Atlanta for the rights of Derek Queen should give paranoia to Pelicans fans. All hell breaks loose in the event that Pelicans pick becomes a top 3 selection in a class boasting one of Cam Boozer, AJ DeBonsa, or Darren Peterson. If Atlanta walks out with one of those guys, this is an absolute nightmare for the Pelicans. This is a D- grade because those 3 guys, even to a greater extent than Derek Queen, can be franchise changers. These are faces of the franchise, true NBA icons going into this draft cycle. Cam Boozer, AJ DeBonsa, Darren Peterson are an elite trio at the very top of the 2026 draft. And to give up your 2026 pick unprotected the way that New Orleans did is incredibly scary. Onsi Salah did a great job for the Hawks getting this deal. And if the upside pans out for them and the downside plays out for New Orleans, it becomes an absolute nightmare, even if Derek Queen is as good as I think he can become. Because just quite frankly, if Derek Queen was in next year's draft, there's no way he's cracking my top 3 with those 3 guys on the board. The New York Knicks here, I gave them a B for Mo Diawara out of Cholet. This is a low-cost, low-opportunity pick here. He's got really good measurables. 7'4" wingspan, 9'2" standing reach. He just has not been productive at all. He's got tools. He's got length, size. And down the road, if they're really invested into his development, this could become a player who, at some point within the next 4 or 5 years, starts to play some real minutes for them. And I don't hate this at pick 51. Now, if this was pick 35 or pick 40, I would say, well, that's way too rich for me. Diawara did not make my final top 60, but as soon as you get down into the last 10 picks of the draft, like if there's a certain guy that a team wants that they're looking at long term, I'm probably going to grade that anywhere from a C+ to a B, like even if I don't necessarily agree with it, because down the road, like you're looking at a player who, if they have certain developmental plans for, maybe they have a certain niche or role that they want him to fill. And Diawara has a lot of those tools where he could be such a long, fluid mover behind Jalen Brunson and around Mikal Bridges, OG Anunoby, around Karl Anthony Towns and Mitchell Robinson, that maybe this pick ends up working out for them in a way that I'm not foreseeing right now. So I went with a safe grade, just a B. It's a low opportunity risk here for them at pick 51. The Oklahoma City Thunder, their draft haul was tremendous. They walk out with Thomas Sorber. They draft Brooks Barnhizer at pick 44 and give him a 2-way contract. And then they also walk out with an additional future first-round pick in 2027 from the Nick Clifford trade at 24 with Sacramento. For me, I give them an A. They came into this draft with only one standard contract spot open on their roster. They used that on Thomas Sorber. They were still able to find value for pick number 24 in a trade. I love that for them big time. They were able to extend their window of flexibility with that trade with Sacramento. At worst, it becomes 2 second-round picks, which Sam Presti, I'm sure, will find some use for. Brooks Barnhizer will play on a 2-way contract for them. This was masterful stuff for the champion Thunder. Thought they did a great job all in all. And I think Sorber specifically stands out as a guy who can actually have a significant impact with their point-of-attack defensive construct that they have there in OKC. The Orlando Magic draft haul, of course, they got Desmond Bane, which sort of factors into this grade, but they also got Jace Richardson, which was a huge steal in night 1, and then Noah Penda at pick 32, where they traded 4 second-round picks to move up to get him. The grade here for me is an A. Jace Richardson, if it was just him in this draft, I would give them an A+. I really like this value as a dribble pass shoot guard who can toggle between on and off ball responsibilities. His shooting, his talent out on the perimeter, tight window coordination. I think all of that is going to be super useful for Orlando offensively. I think the Magic are an easy bet to win 50 to 55 games at least this upcoming season. There's a good chance that they have the best record in the Eastern Conference, and if they don't have the best record, they'll for sure be in the top 3 alongside Cleveland and New York. The Magic are really good. Noah Penda, I think, is a solid grab. I don't love trading 4 second-round picks to make sure you get him. I had him in the mid to late 30s on my own big board. This is about right where the value is for him to draft him. So if this is their guy, I can't hate on it too much. I still give them an A overall. And I do think he can carve out a role in this league. I do think he's pretty similar to Josh Green when it comes to the playmaking, the defensive impact and athletic tools, and the questionable shot making. But the Magic here, it really is predicated from getting Jace Richardson and Desmond Bane. They did a tremendous job in their backcourt, got way better going into next year. The Philadelphia 76ers, their draft haul included VJ Edgecombe at pick 3, and then at pick 35, Janai Broome out of Auburn. For me, I gave them a B+. Edgecombe, not a guy that I had in the top 3 or 4 on my final big board, but I understand the appeal. I understand the allure. He's a super athlete and someone who the potential really is extremely high on. I don't think he'll become a multi-time All-Star, but if I'm wrong about a player in this draft, there's a decent chance it becomes VJ Edgecombe because, if we see some unprecedented development and he takes significant strides forward offensively with the ball in his hands, he becomes such an awesome pickup long-term next to Tyrese Maxey. And then Janai Broome, I think, is an underrated player. Finished in the middle of the 40s on my big board, I believe number 44 to be exact. This guy can play basketball. Really good rebounder. Rebounded on the offensive glass at an elite level for Auburn, and has always been productive no matter where he plays. So I think with how injury-prone Joel Embiid is, having both Janai Broome and Adem Bona off the bench, 2 different kinds of bigs, but can both play for you, I think it makes some sense as insurance for the 76ers. The Phoenix Suns, their draft haul. This is a big one here. They walk out of the draft with Kaman Maluach at pick number 10, Rasheer Fleming at pick number 31, Kobe Brea at pick 41. Mark Williams in a trade with the Charlotte Hornets. Jalen Green and Dillon Brooks, part of that Kevin Durant trade. This team killed it. The Phoenix Suns get an A++. I think they are the winners of the 2025 NBA draft. They came in with a prerogative to get younger, faster, bigger, stronger. They did all of it. They got 2 awesome centers in this draft, walking away with Kaman Maluach, who was number 4 on my final big board, and then landing Mark Williams, someone who is a second draft bet here after missing so much time with injuries. To give up pick 29 and a bad 2029 first-round pick to get him, who he could arguably be their starting center next year, that's an absolute steal of a trade for the Phoenix Suns. They go from 0 good centers on their roster to 48 minutes of good center play just like that overnight. Not a huge fan of Jalen Green, but he's going to get some buckets for them. He'll definitely be a bit of an empty calorie score for them this upcoming year, I'm sure. Dillon Brooks is still in his late 20s, so he's not as old as I think many people assume he is. The Suns got way younger. They got a lot better defensively. I think Rasheer Fleming can cover a lot of space and ground for them as well, and shoots the basketball at a pretty effective clip. I think Phoenix just nailed it with this draft. Kobe Brea was top 22 on my big board as well at number 22. So they walk out with 3 players who I had in the top 25 in Kaman Maluach at 4, Rasheer Fleming at 18, and Kobe Brea at 22. I thought they did a tremendous job finding value, aggressively moving up in the draft, and finding a trade here with Charlotte as well that makes a lot of sense for them in Mark Williams. I thought they just did a tremendous job. You still have Ryan Dunn in the mix. This team's actually quite athletic now, and that's something we just haven't been able to say about Phoenix around Devin Booker in the recent iterations of this team. I think this next year, while they're still not going to be a great team, they're very young now. There's going to have to be a pretty steep learning curve ahead of them when it comes to transitioning to the NBA. I think they are long-term a lot better than they were previously, which is why they're the big winners of the draft, and why for Houston, if you're a Rockets fan watching this, you have to be saying, wait, did our 2027, 2029 assets just get a little bit worse by bailing them out of the Durant saga? I think the answer to that, unfortunately for Rockets fans, is yes. The Portland Trailblazers draft haul here. They walk out with Hanson Yang at pick number 16, and they get a future first-round pick as well, as they traded down from number 11 in that deal with the Grizzlies regarding Cedric Coward. The grade for me here is a B. I really love them moving down. If it was just the move down, it would have been an A grade. Hanson Yang was a little early. I had him in the mid-30s on my final big board. They picked him at 16, but I understand the appeal here. He was super productive in the CBA. He's a guy who the BPM numbers, all the advanced analytics, all of that stuff are really suggesting will return top 30 value in this draft. Clearly, the Trailblazers felt that way as well, enough to pick him at number 16. Now, I would have loved for them to maybe try and move down again, even if it was just for a few second-round picks. You saw a team like Utah jump up from 21 to 18. Maybe they would have been willing to move up to 16 instead for a similar package. I wonder if Portland could have gotten a little bit more moving down again. I don't think Hanson Yang was going to go in that top 20 range if it wasn't Portland drafting him. But he's a skilled big, a hub big man, and someone who I think helps their long-term future. I think the most important thing that I want to highlight here, this is, I think, the big storyline here. I think the Blazers are set up to go star hunting down the road. That 2028 first is going to be a really useful tool to do that. And I would watch for Portland to be a big-time buyer within the next 2 or 3 years because they have a lot of contracts that could help them get to some huge money in the future. For the Sacramento Kings, their draft haul included Nick Clifford, who they traded up for, and Maxime Reynaud. I gave them an A-. Now, I don't love giving up future draft control, especially in 2027, because now you're limited. You can't trade your 2026 first until draft night. You can't trade your 2028 first until the 2027 draft night is over. So because of that, the Kings are a little restricted now and limited in their trade flexibility once again. We just got through this year with the Kevin Huerter trade that the Kings made a few years ago. But nonetheless, they got good players. I think Clifford, who was top 20 on my final big board, Maxime Reynaud, who was top 35 on my final big board. I thought from a draft slot perspective, they did really well. Now, again, I don't love trading that 2027 first. That's why it's not an A or an A plus here, even though both of these guys were drafted behind their perceived big board slots for me. But I still think down the road, like the Kings, even though they sacrificed flexibility, they got some solid young players here who come in with some college experience and some real opportunity to play big minutes for the Kings pretty quickly into their NBA careers. The San Antonio Spurs, their draft haul included Dylan Harper, Carter Bryant, and future second-round picks in a trade that sent out pick 38. This is an A-plus grade for the Spurs. If you're a Spurs fan watching this, you've just got to be gassed up, excited right now. You guys did tremendously well. Dylan Harper, the second best player in the draft. You guys made the right decision, the right choice drafting him at number 2. The more guards, the more ball handling talent, the better. If you look at the NBA playoffs, the teams who have multiple guys who can dribble, pass, and shoot are typically the ones that succeed. The Spurs got that here with Harper at number 2. I think, too many people have freaked out about his shooting numbers. I thought he had a pretty solid season at Rutgers, especially given the team context around him. I think he's going to be tremendous for the Spurs. And Carter Bryant was a great fit as well here. Low usage player, just a 16% usage rate at Arizona, but I think that's exactly what the Spurs need. Someone who's going to kind of fall in line, fit into the group, and impact the game in other ways. Defensively, can pick up 94 feet, can cover ground, can be a helper at the rim, just goes and makes stuff happen defensively. And I think that's a guy that Spurs fans, especially as diehard as they can be, which I love for you guys, there's a lot of hype that is going to be generated for Carter Bryant from this fan base, and for good reason. They're going to love the style that he plays with. They're going to love the effort, the intensity, and I think Carter Bryant's going to win over a lot of Spurs fans. So I'm really excited about this for San Antonio. Harper was number 2 on my board. Bryant was number 14 on my board. They literally drafted both of those guys at the exact slots I had them on my final big board. Can't be mad about that. Really like these two guys for the Spurs, and I think their young core is so good moving forward. The Toronto Raptors, Masai Ujiri out, Colin Murray-Boyles and Elijah Martin in. What a shakeup today. I do give the Raptors an A- here. I like their draft. I think CMB is a great player, someone who the analytic models really love. This is a super impact player, made South Carolina actually pretty good in his minutes on the floor. The issue was they didn't have good minutes without him on the court. And that's a big reason why they weren't a great team. But Colin Murray-Boyles did all he did, and I think he'll be all he could to help that team. And I think for Toronto here, he's going to be a good additive piece into their team defense, especially, and give them more connectivity. The Raptors move the ball at a high pace and a high level. That's going to continue to be the case here, adding these two guys in, especially CMB at pick number 9. It's surprising to see Masai Ujiri go today. I was pretty shocked by that, but I think the Raptors did very well overall in this year's draft. The Utah Jazz walk away with Ace Bailey at pick 5, Walter Clayton Jr. at pick 18, and John Tonje at number 53 in this year's draft. The grade for me is a B. Ace Bailey finished at number 12 on my big board. Walter Clayton Jr. in the 20s. And John Tonje in the 50s. So the value isn't super far from where I have these guys graded. I just did prefer other outcomes. I would have really liked Trey Johnson for the Jazz, as well as a few other guys for Utah. I do think while Ace Bailey has some functional tools and some skills that make him a pretty high floor player, I'm not buying the upside. I think the Jazz will still be waiting for the 2026 draft to roll around for them to find a future face of the franchise. I don't think that they got one here in this draft, but I thought they got some good serviceable players. I think Clayton Jr. and Ace Bailey can both be good long-term pieces for them that have impact on winning. Clayton Jr.'s three-point volume, his ability to handle the basketball, I think will all help them big time. I do think there's a good chance he's just the best guard that they have moving forward, better than Collier, better than Keontae George. And that's kind of more of an admission on how I feel and an indictment on those two guys than it is on Clayton. And then Ace Bailey, he's going to be a starting wing for them. So it's not like this pick's bad. They did a pretty good job. I'm just not overly blown away. They had solid assets coming into the draft. I'm giving them a B. Then the Washington Wizards. Draft haul, Trey Johnson, Will Riley, Jameer Watkins. I am giving them an A with a huge onus on that number 6 pick, getting Trey Johnson, who I had 5th on my final big board. I thought they did tremendously well. It gives them an offensive go-to player, an offensive scorer, someone who's going to be able to shoot the ball at a super high clip for them. In addition to that, they come away with a couple big, long players in Will Riley and Jameer Watkins. Watkins got long arms that go on for days, as Jay Billis would say. And then Riley can really fill it up. Some significant offensive talent as a big, long, lengthy forward. I think he has to build to his frame, get a bit stronger yet at this point. But the upside is definitely significant for a team here in Washington who's going to be able to give and afford on-ball opportunity to some of these young guys. I thought the 2025 NBA draft was a smooth one. Again, make sure you guys do subscribe both to the channel and to the Substack. Thanks all so much for tuning in to my official 2025 NBA draft grades. Let me know your thoughts down in the comment section below, and we'll catch you in the very next Utility Sports video.